Hi, my name is Awilda Jimenez. I am the Virtual Content Specialist Teacher at PS 386. I am creating this teacher-facing video in partnership with Maria Friedland from the Division of Multilingual Learners. Our goal is to create content in social studies for our multilingual learners and English language learners during remote and blended instruction. The lesson that I'm focusing on today is the grade 4, unit 3, day 13 lesson titled The Battle of Golden Hill. Our focus question is what events led to the war with Great Britain? The lesson objective is to analyze images and text in order to explain the key events of a local battle in the American Revolution. The correlating passport to social studies workbook pages that will be used for the introduction portion of the lesson are found on page 144, and the images on page 146, 140, and 147. The pages are the same if you're using the workbook in a different language. Using the workbook or giving students access to the workbook in their native language, it will be very beneficial in this lesson. Students can be given the English pages and the pages in their native language to analyze the images for the introductory portion of the lesson the night or even 2 days before the actual lesson, so that students have time to read a little bit about the content and study the images. This will better prepare our multilingual learners and English language learners, not just with learning the content, but participating during discussions. So the vocabulary that students will need to understand in order to access the content are protest. And the idea here is that students already have some background knowledge with protests. This past year, students have either heard or seen images online or on the news about the Black Lives Matter protests and the protests for immigration rights. Here are some images that will support students in building their background knowledge. It's important for students to understand how protests look now versus what they're going to look like when they study the events that led to the American Revolution. Other words are rebellion and Sons of Liberty. Students need to understand that the Sons of Liberty are groups of colonists who protested and fought against the British taxes. Big ideas in this lesson are that there is a fight for power and control. Students learned in the previous lesson that the British government wants to tax the colonists so they can pay for the French and Indian War. British government sent soldiers, also referred to as redcoats, to protect the colonists. Colonists don't feel that they need to be governed by the British, and they also don't trust the soldiers that are there. They think the soldiers have ulterior motives and are not trustworthy. Symbolism. The Liberty Pole is a symbol or a sign of protest, and it's also a place for planning and gathering and organizing by the Sons of Liberty. The introductory portion of the lesson requires that students analyze images. So this image, and then here we could read to our students. The title is Raising the Liberty Pole. Liberty poles were used by ancient Romans as a symbol for freedom. Click here to see a present-day Liberty Pole in downtown Rochester, New York. Here, a group called the Sons of Liberty organized protests against the British, like the one that you see in this picture. One of those protests led to a battle between colonists and British officials, the Battle of Golden Hill. There could be an audio clip linked to this slide where you are reading this, but really the focus is to analyze the images from the lesson. So it's this image, and this image, and then students can fill out this organizer, especially the students that are completing this work the day before, or at least starting the work a day before. What do you think is going on in this image? What do you see that makes you say that? What questions do you have about this image? You could choose this tool as an organizer to help students jot down their thoughts as they analyze the images. If you use a tool like the See, Think, Wonder chart, what do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? If you use that tool in science or in reading or writing, and students are familiar with that tool, you could use that instead of this organizer. Consistency is really important for multilingual learners and English language learners. Once students jot some of their ideas down and come to class ready, they could, whether they're remote or in a blended setting, you could spend a few times having students share, either in small groups or whole class, some of the things they noticed about each image. If students are working from the workbook, they could use the template on page 144 for this activity. It's the same page in any other resource that are in the different languages. Students can share, and this will give some students time to revise some of the things they notice or bring up new questions that they may have. Students can then go on Padlet as a group, click on the image. They could spend some time analyzing if they need to, and then they can add their comments. Right? It says click on the images, look closely. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? If you don't want to have a discussion beforehand, that's fine, because students can also add their comments and other students can respond to those comments or add new comments. And once students read and see their peers' comments, they could go back to their chart and revise their thinking or come up with new questions that they have as a result of listening to their peers. So those are just some ways that you can scaffold and make content more accessible for English language learners and multilingual learners during the introduction of this lesson. The technological platforms that I used were Padlet and Google Classroom, as well as the resources from the Passport to Social Studies workbook.